explain to you what it is in details. So I won't take your time, and without any ado, let's just dive into the topics. Before that, I would want to introduce you to the moderators for today. That is Medha Menon, Medha Kenkia, and Sarah. Okay, so over to you, Medha.
Okay, so before we start with the topic, we just like for you guys to introduce yourself. So we'll start with Nitisha, ma'am. Could you please introduce yourself?
Okay, first norm for the session, please don't call me ma'am.
Okay.
My name is Nitisha. I am an engineering grad by education. I worked in the startup and corporate space for around 4 years before I switched to the development sector. And it's been 5 years that I've been working in the sector. Worked with organizations like Teach for India and Care India, education, livelihoods, gender, the works. Currently, I'm doing fundraising and managing alumni engagement at this amazing institution called Indian School of Development Management. Please do check it out. We are not a school, though it is a school, but it's not the traditional school in the truest sense of being affiliated to an AICTE. We are an unaccredited institution as of now. I am also a Youth Hiyama's Action Network Fellow. That's how I think most of my online engagement around menstrual health and hygiene started, because of my campaign called Green the Switch that I'm running on my handle called @TheBloodyFeminist. I've recently been trained to become a climate reality leader by the Climate Reality Project, which is a training that the ex-US Vice President Al Gore does. And there are like a few thousand leaders who are trained every year on the topic of climate change and climate action. The reason sustainable menstruation as a topic is really close to my heart is because I made the switch 3 years back, and I started reading and understanding more about it. And I think just creating that space for more menstruators and non-menstruators to be aware about the issue is something that I'm really passionate about.
Guys, her page is amazing. You have to check it out. We'll leave a link in the WhatsApp group. Next, we'll go to Dr. Deekshita. Can you please tell us about yourself?
Yeah, so hi guys, I'm Deekshita. So I'm a resident doctor right now at Trustwell Hospital, and I'm a founder of An Inclusive Future. It's just a small initiative that I started last December. So this basically, the main intention for starting this was to educate especially rural girls and government school going girls about menstrual health and menstrual health management in general, because I think I found a huge void. There's a huge gap in with respect to this menstrual management and hygiene practices, and they were not taught, because usually most government schools either have male teachers or teachers who are not very well versed with this topic, so they usually just skip, and so you know how it goes. So I think it all started with that. So it was me, my friend, and my primary facilitator, Jilshi, and another friend of mine, Aishwarya. The three of us started this together, sort of, and we started going to government schools, teaching these kids. I think we were very skeptical until the first session. I think after our interaction with the girls and seeing how enthusiastic they were, especially with regards to periods, I think that's what that session changed it for us. I think after that, we truly wanted to include more girls and also introduce the idea of sustainable menstruation. So we collaborated with Ecofem and another biodegradable pad company. So yeah, I think we're slowly starting off. We've been educating ASHA workers as well, because I think they are the primary point of contact, especially for rural girls. So yeah, this is what we've been doing, and thank you for having us actually.
Thank you for being here. Your initiative is amazing.
Thank
Now,
you.
we'll go over to Dr. Jilshi. She personally introduced me to the switch. So please take it away, Dr. Jilshi.
Hi guys, my name is Jilshi. I am a medical graduate and I'm currently working as a doctor in a rural hospital in Tamil Nadu. Like Dikshita said, I'm also a part of the Uninclusive Future, and I think the reason why we've been working in this field is because we've realized that even though menstruation is something that more than half of the population actually goes through, it's still something that nobody really talks about. Like even in the city, you realize that bringing up about menstruation, even with your guy friends, they feel really uncomfortable whenever you talk about periods with them. And I think that's something that needs to change, and the change has to happen now. And the only way to talk about change something is basically by starting to talk about it. And that's what we have been trying to do. We've been trying to teach young children about menstruation so that they can deal with a lot of taboos that surround menstruation, and at least in the next generation that comes they will be able to educate them better. And so that's what we've been trying to do. I'm also a feminist, and I've been trying to unlearn a lot of things that were taught to me as a kid, because I've realized that a lot of things that are taught to you, even though it comes from a good place, is not actually correct, and you need to unlearn a lot of things to make a change in the society. And I've started using sustainable menstrual products for around 8 months now. I started initially with a cloth pad, then I switched to a menstrual cup, and I've been using the menstrual cup continuously now. And what I have realized after using a menstrual cup is that when you use a sanitary pad, you feel like you're bleeding out a lot every day because the pads get soaked so fast. And only once you use a menstrual cup, you realize that actually the amount of blood that you're losing is not that much. And it also helps you to get more closer to your own body because you understand your cycles better and you don't dread periods anymore that much, I feel. That's it. Over to you,
That's very.
Sarah.
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. So we'll start with the panel discussion. Medha.
Hi guys, today we'll start with the talk session. I'll start with what exactly sustainable menstruation is and why should we make this change in the context of environment. I would like Nitisha to explain this to us.
Right. Thank you so much, Medha. I've tried to simplify the understanding around sustainable menstruation, and in very simple terms and in one line, it means making your periods more eco-friendly. That's it, right? And it's easy for people to understand this. I've also learned that a lot of people don't understand what menstruation as a term means because it's a technical term, and because we use period as a colloquial euphemism, so people generally understand periods but don't understand what menstruation means. It's a very interesting learning once I started doing a lot of things digitally. The reason sustainability is something that excited me is because when you're working in the development sector, when I started visiting, for example, my first understanding of menstruation and the larger narrative around menstrual health became very, very real when I visited government schools during my field visits with Teach for India. And initially, because my role is not that of engaging as a teacher in a classroom, I don't generally notice all of these issues. But when I came back, there was an interesting conversation around parent teachers meeting that was going, and somebody was talking about how they don't want to send their female children to school anymore because they've gotten their periods now. And it was a very interesting conversation, and because my experience was very limited, I did not comment then and there. But when I came back and researched, there's an interesting data point that talks about how most female children, female girls, adolescent girls drop out of primary grades and drop out of school the moment they get their periods, right? And for someone like me who's just studied, I think education has been a big enabler for me as a female. That just seemed very, very shocking and inhumane. And then I started researching more, because in the development sector, one issue is not always around one issue. Education is connected to health, health is connected to gender, gender is connected to livelihood, and all of this is very much connected to environment. So environment as an issue became more real when we started learning a little bit about single-use plastic. And I started my journey around sustainability by giving up single-use plastic and cutting it out for 1 month. And it was difficult, right? And I realized how difficult it is to be sustainable because I am so accustomed to single-use plastic, and the market is not very plastic friendly as well. So I had to buy if I am traveling. So then I started making those changes. And while I was researching all of this, I came across the menstrual cup, and I was like, hey, oh, this is something that's very, very doable, right? And the moment I researched about the climate impacts of menstruation, I was a little disgusted with myself, and I was really, really shocked that for the last 15, 20 years of my life, what have I been doing to the environment? Right? If I would have known, I'm very, very confident that most of you on the call are much younger than me. And I'm so, so thrilled that so many young menstruators are not only making the switch themselves, but also taking up the opportunity to create the platform for others. I think that has been a huge motivation for me. And when you research the sustainable menstruation aspect, the reason it's sustainable is something that's become a very jazz word in the development sector. Everything is sustainable. The program is sustainable. The context is sustainable. And I think it's overused a lot. And just uncovering that meaning in the context of menstrual health is something I realized, which is there around the menstrual waste that is generated, how that waste is managed, and if that waste is not managed, what happens to the environment. And it leads back to air pollution, it leads back to soil pollution, it leads back to plastic pollution in many, many ways. And hopefully over the course of this particular dialogue, we'll uncover bits and pieces of it. I'm sure there's a lot of literature around there. And Jilshi and Deeksha are going to be my technical experts who will help you. I'm very sure. I love having technical experts in a conversation because they become more credible, and it's not just, oh, Nitisha's personal experience is what this is about. So that's what sustainable menstruation means, right? How do you take that first step, which is becoming aware that there are more choices of menstrual products in the market right now, and then making that switch and going on that journey of discovering what sustainable menstruation means for me. Each of us have a very different menstruation cycle, have a very different vagina, and our bodies are very, very different. So what sustainable menstruation means for all of us is for all of us to define.
That was very well put, Nitisha. Thank you so much. Now, it is like how Nitisha said, all of us menstruating women, we menstruate every month. And if all of us make a switch, we could impact environmental health in a much larger scale. So, but most women here still use pads and tampons. So I'd like Dr. Deekshita to tell us what the health hazards of pads and tampons are.
Okay, I think this is going to take some time to explain. I think I'm going to structure it in a way that people can really understand the effects. Right. So when we look for, when we think a product is bad for us, what's the first thing we do? We look for the ingredients in the product. We look for the chemicals that are listed in the product, on the wrappers, or whatever it is. So if you guys have ever tried looking for ingredients in your sanitary pads, so I have a wrapper here. So if you guys have ever tried looking for it, you will find that there are no ingredients. So this is because the sanitary pad or any other menstruating product is a medical grade product. So by law, none of these companies are required to actually list these ingredients. Okay, so now when we say, okay, medical grade products, medical grade, anything medical will relate to, okay, safe, hygienic, right? So I think I'm going to start sharing some slides with you guys. so that I can show you as I talk about it. So can you guys see this?
Yes, yes, we can.
Right. So this is the IS 5405. That's the Indian standard specification for the sanitary napkin manufacturing. So I just want you guys to quickly take a look at the materials and the requirements. So materials are the absorbent filler and the covering. So when we come to requirements, there are basically three main requirements: the absorbency and the ability to withstand pressure after absorption, the disposability, and the pH value. So I'll give you guys some time to just read about the requirements. Just read it in detail. Take about a minute or so. So these are the only requirements that's been listed, right, by the ISI 5405. And if you think medical grade products are actually good for you, so this particular standard specification has been drafted in 1980 and it hasn't changed since then, which means we are still following the same requirements without keeping in mind about the chemicals that are going into the pad. No one is regulating anything with regards to the chemicals. Mainly, I think the chemicals. Look, if you can see the requirements, it's just so basic that any market, any production company can manufacture these products, and there are no particular regulations when it comes to ingredients. So jumping to the ingredients, firstly, I want to talk about the layers, about the sanitary pad to, make you understand a little better. So the first is the top dry plastic layer. I think all of us have seen a pad. So the top dry plastic layer is the top layer, and this is basically made of plastic. So a couple of days ago, I tried to burn the sanitary pad. So I separated them in layers. First, I burnt the top dry plastic layer. It was again, it burnt or rather melted just like any other plastic polythene bag. Then comes the super absorbent polymer gel, or this is the middle layer, the absorbent layer. So this layer is what you pay all your money for, and this layer, the rate of absorption, the efficacy of it determines how good the product is. And this is what all of us shell out our money for, the absorbent layer. So this absorbent layer is basically made up of cellulose, wood pulp, and the next layer is the plastic back sheet, and these are the silicone paper. So the main bulk of it is the wood pulp, and the wood pulp basically, if you Google wood pulp, is brown in color. So what happens is in the manufacturing of sanitary napkins, this wood pulp is bleached with chlorine, and that's why you get the pure white color of sanitary pads. And in the process of bleaching, what happens is a chemical called dioxin is released. And this particular dioxin is extremely bad for our health, and I will explain as to why. So firstly, just look at this slide. So these are some of the chemicals that go into the sanitary pad: dioxins and furans, pesticide residues, unknown fragrance chemicals. I think all of us are aware about the fragrances that are added to our pads, adhesive chemicals. So firstly, talking about dioxins. So now dioxin is a product that is found everywhere around us. So there's been a debate between the FDA and the EPA, the Environment Protection Agency, and the Food and Drug Administration. So what FDA says is, because we are surrounded by dioxin everywhere, small amounts are negligible, so they don't really affect us. So what goes into a pad is still considered negligible. But EPA says otherwise. Even small amounts of dioxin will affect us, which I agree, because let's say we use about 12 to 16 pads per cycle, and this amounts to about 190 to 200 pads per year, and this goes on for the rest of our menstruating life. So small amounts of dioxin exposure happens each and every month for about till the end of menopause, which is a lot of chemical exposure. So these dioxins are basically hormone disruptors. They cause PID, pelvic inflammatory diseases. They cause ovarian cancer, infertility in some cases. And I think I have some research articles regarding this. So, and if you want, you can ask me and I'll send you the links for all of those. Next, I want to talk about is the synthetic and the plastic that goes into it. So any organic material, when trapped between two layers of plastic for more than 4 to 5 hours, it is natural with all the chemicals that it forms a breeding ground for bacteria. So that is one of the main hazards of using a sanitary pad for more than 4 to 8 hours. Apart from these, we have your phthalates, which so if you guys have used tampons, your tampons have a cardboard applicator. So this cardboard applicator, basically what it does, the smooth finishing that comes on it is basically made of phthalates. And this phthalate, they dysregulate your gene expression. And when it comes to your tampons, again, same thing, dioxins and furans, pesticide residues, unknown fragrance chemicals, and also GMOs. I think GMOs play a huge role in causing really bad effects to our health. So I think if you look at this screen, I think you'll understand better as to how these chemicals really affect us. Now, a vaginal tissue is not like any other part of our skin. It's very permeable. It contains mucous membranes and lymphatic vessels. So the rate of absorption through your vagina is much more as compared to your skin. So to give you guys a general idea, I've added a small para from a study. So vaginally applied dose of estradiol, that is estrogen, resulted in systemic estradiol levels in the body 10 to 80 times greater compared to the same dose given orally, which goes to show how absorbent our vaginal area really is. So vaginal exposure to hormone mimicking chemicals like dioxins, pesticides, and you name it. I have an entire list of chemicals. So you can imagine the amount of effect it could have on our bodies when exposed chronically to these. I think I can go on and on about the other chemicals and the health effects, but I think you guys get the basic idea. Yeah.
It's scary to think that we've been using such a hazardous
Really
product
is.
for so long.
It really is. And when I dove, like when I actually dug in and did my own research, it was really shocking to know all of these effects and how there are not many articles published about this. There are not many researches conducted about this, and it's just really sad. And I think more and more, if any of you are interested, I think this is something you guys should really look into if you're interested in research. Definitely go for this. We need more articles. We need more proof with regards to this.
Thank you, Dr. Dikshita, so much for opening our eyes about this. So, Dr. Jirshi, could you please enumerate the other products we can use to replace pads and tampons?
Okay, so the products that are available in the market right now, we have menstrual cups that you can use. We have biodegradable sanitary napkins which are available. We have cloth pads which are available. We have menstrual discs which are available, and we have period panties. And in the latest one new thing that has come up is the philosophy of free bleeding that I think a lot of people have started to use also. So these are the options that we have right now. And even when you're switching to a new sustainable menstrual product, you don't have to stick with one menstrual product itself. You can always combine either a cloth pad or a menstrual cup together and choose whichever one is more comfortable for you.
Thank you, Dr. Jilshi. So now there's been a lot. If I were to pick one of the sustainable menstruation products, one would be cotton pads. Now there's a lot of myths surrounding it as to how to use it and what are the pros and cons of it. I would like Nitisha ma'am to just break down this information for all of us to understand.
Right. I like to put a caveat there. I've not used the cloth pads myself. I converted to a menstrual cup 3 years back, and this is the product of my choice that I know. But when I started researching about more products, I did give biodegradable pads a shot, the Sathi pad, and I was not very comfortable using them. That was my first step. So instead of moving, so I know a couple of my friends started from biodegradable pads. We now have other players in the market who have actually given making modern day biodegradable pads a shot, which actually feel and look exactly like sanitary napkin, but are more eco-friendly. Now we still don't have research to show how eco-friendly they are, which was one of the reasons I didn't stick to a biodegradable product, because none of the products mention how much time do they biodegrade in. Also, the Boon co-founder Sonal Jain is a friend, and in a conversation with her, she's been guiding me, and we've been having discussions around menstrual health and hygiene. She pointed out she did a research with a friend and took 3-4 different brands and did try composting the pads herself. And then the research that she found is already published on Youth Ki Awaaz on the platform Youth Ki Awaaz. So do check it out. I'll be more than happy to share the link with either Sanskriti or Sara, and they can share in your WhatsApp groups as well. So the next product that I really found helpful, and a lot of people in my network have started using, is the cloth pad. So the cloth pad that you see right now is an EcoFem cloth pad. EcoFem, why? Is very quickly a little bit of context. So I conduct sustainable menstruation workshops under my project called Let's Talk Period. And EcoFem, I reached out to EcoFem because right now, globally and in India, they are the biggest, I don't want to use the word player, but the biggest product cloth pad manufacturer and expert of sorts in the sustainable menstruation industry. And they were really helpful to help me, guide me across, educate me about the product, which is why they are also a project partner, and they were happy to share this. I am still to give the pads a shot because I'm really comfortable with menstrual cups, so I don't want to give it a try, because I'm like, it works for me as of now. So this is what a modern day cloth pad looks like. The EcoFem cloth pad is made of organic cotton and a PUN. So this layer that you see is a polyurethane layer, polyelasticin, which is used to make the pad leak proof, right? So this layer is made of plastic, right? And everything else is cotton, organic cotton, which is biodegradable. One EcoFem cloth pad is equal to 75 single-use sanitary napkins, right? That's a lot. Because Diksha has already taken you through all the technicalities, a very interesting calculation to do, which is something that also, like I mentioned, shocked me, was since my menarche, how many pads until date have I used, right? And calculating the amount of plastic that I have generated in the process, right? It's a very simple calculation. There is research to show that a single-use sanitary pad is equal to 4 bags of plastic, right? So please calculate. You don't have to share the number, or you can share the number. It would be great to see what the average number looks like. So the number of pads I use every month into 4, into 12, and into 35. 12 because that's the number of months in a year, and 35 because of the average menstruating cycle of a menstruator is around 35 years. And that is the number. So for me, that number is 21,000 plastic bags, right? And I'm sure if y'all will do the calculation, most of my sessions, when we do the calculation, the range is between 17,000 to 35,000 plastic bags. And in a lifetime, a menstruator generates around 200 kgs of waste, just menstrual plastic waste, right? Which is why the cloth pad, and I know one of the questions that I've gotten is, this is also plastic, so we will be generating waste. Yes, I will be generating waste, but over 5 years, the Ecofam cloth pads last 5 years, and if you visit their Instagram and Facebook pages, there is evidence. Menstruators have shared their worn cloth pads, which they are now switching or ordering a new one. And it was very interesting. I was also very skeptical initially on how do I wash it. So this is what a cloth pad looks like. It feels exactly like your sanitary napkin. It has these buttons that go over your underwear, and this stays still. Once in one cycle, on an average, 6 to 8 pads is what you need. Depending on your flow, you can order. Ecofam pads come also in different sizes. So the one that I showed you is a night pad. This is a normal regular day pad, and there's a small one also that comes, which is sort of like a last day or acts as a panty liner as well. How to use the cloth pads? The way you use sanitary napkins. The only thing is, how do you reuse your cloth pad? For that, this needs to be after your periods. It needs to be soaked in cold water overnight and then washed with hands gently. It could also be machine washed, depending upon your preference. And very mild soap is required. It doesn't need to be bleached. It doesn't need to be, for example, one of the things I thought was, because it's period blood, won't it stain? And then I would have to use the way I use a Rin bar over soap. That is something that you don't do with your cloth pads. Once it is soaked, because it's organic cotton, the blood drains itself out, and then it has to be gently washed by doing this, right? Rubbing together, and the blood comes off. The stains may come depending upon how you're using it, and they need to be dried in sunlight, or one of the other hacks that one of my friends shared, because she's based out of Bangalore and the monsoons are create havoc in Bangalore. So how to dry the pads? So she uses the hair dryer, the blow dryer, to once the water is all drained out, she uses that, and the pads are good as new for reusing. So that's one hack that she shared with me, which I'm sharing. I'm hoping that there will be one day when I will have to use the cloth pad, because either I'll be traveling, and a lot of friends in my network, even though I am a cupboard and I advocate for menstrual cups, they have found a lot of comfort in cloth pads. And like I said, each body is different, each menstrual cycle is different. So it depends what works for which person. So this is what organic cloth pads are about. The biodegradable pads, so one of my friends who suffers from endometriosis and adenomyosis, she shared, she started using the P-Safe biodegradable pad, and because of adeno, her flow is really high, and the pads did not work out for her. So in case, the reason I think we don't talk, the need to talk about sustainable products and informed choices becomes important, is how will I know if the biodegradable pads work or not unless somebody tells me, right? So for example, if Nitisha tries 10 products, then she'll be able to choose which is the best one for her. But right now the market is so small, and there is very little review of products that happen. For example, I know that I'll go to, say, Big Chill for getting the best pastry in town. For example, how do I know which is the best menstrual cup that's available? How do I know? So there's, like, I think Jilshi highlighted it, there's so little research around this issue because there's lack of funds. when people take up research, you need funds to do research, and the market right now is heavily male dominated market, right? A very interesting thing that our friend was sharing is the PPE kits, because of COVID, that have been designed for a male body, right? It has not been designed for a menstruating female body. And this is something where gender comes into focus, and why menstrual health, hygiene, and advocacy becomes important to talk. And why, for example, Diksha, Jilshi, and me, we have our full-time jobs as well. Why are we giving so much time, research, and effort to having these conversations, right? So I think that becomes important. So there have been also reviews. For some people, the EcoFem pads are too small, right? Soch Green is another manufacturer of cloth pad, and they have a larger pad that is very apt for night flow. And this is again based on the research that I've done and personal experience. There is no other evidence apart from word of mouth or personal experience. So that's what I have about cloth pads. In case there are any questions about the particular product, please do type out in the chat box and we can take them towards the end.
Nitisha, you did say that there was a leak-proof lining in the cloth pads. So is it a myth that cloth pads stain clothes and underwear faster than sanitary napkins?
Sorry, Medha, could you please repeat the question?
You said that there is a leak-proof lining in the cloth pads. So is it true or is it not that cloth pads can stain the underwear or the clothes faster than plastic sanitary napkins, the pads?
Right. So I'm not sure. Again, it depends on the flow. For example, when I used single-use sanitary napkin, I used to change 3 times a day on my first and second days. That was my flow. And on this 3rd and 4th day, I used 2 pads, and by the 5th day, I had 1 pad that got me covered. I think similarly, the cloth pads also exactly work similar to most menstruators. As say, I don't think it's a better or worse leak-proof layer. I think it depends on the person's flow.
If any of the other panelists have anything to contribute about cloth pads, if you all have used it, personal experiences.
So, I think what I wanted to add was the cloth pads that we are using right now, they are the modern versions of the cloth pads. But there are been people who have been using just cloth pieces as a pad also. And that's like completely okay for you to use just a cloth piece itself as a pad. You don't need to necessarily buy a modern cloth pad and use it. But effective those cloth pads will be, or will they increase the chances of infections. So just to reduce the chance of infection, the only thing that you need to do is ensure that you wash the cloth properly and dry it in sunlight, and then you're good to go. So you can use just a normal cloth piece itself as a cloth pad also.
So the main question for today, menstrual cups, how to use them, when to use them. So I'll give it to the expert, Dr. Jilshi.
Okay, 1 second. I'll just open the presentation. All right. So for those of you who've never seen a menstrual cup, so this is what a menstrual cup looks like. And so what you need to understand about a menstrual cup is it's made up of medical grade silicone. And why this is important is that silicone materials are generally inert in nature. So even once you've inserted the cup into your vagina, it does not react with your vaginal tissues, nor does it react with the blood that's collected in the cup. Okay. And there are different shapes and sizes that are available in the market, depending upon which brand that you use. But most of the brands have a basic design to them. They are funnel shaped or bell shaped devices, which you insert into the vagina and it collects the blood. Now, if you look at your menstrual cup, the topmost part is called as the rim of the cup, and that's technically a little thicker than the rest of the body. And why it's thicker is because once you've inserted the cup into the vagina, it helps to hold the cup in place because of the thickness. And right below the rim, you'll have these tiny holes that are present, which are called as the air holes. And that's important because the way a menstrual cup the way it works is basically by creating a suction. So once you've inserted the cup inside your vagina, this suction, the suction that it's creating is what's actually holding the cup in place, and it does not move up or go down once it's kept in place. And that's why the air holes are important. And when you're inserting the cup, you always fold the cup and you're inserting it. So you don't insert the cup the way it's open like this, you always fold it. So when you're folding it, you're releasing the air that is present, you're releasing the suction, and that's what makes the insertion part easier. Then you have the main body of the cup, that's what actually collects the blood. Then some cups have this tiny part below it, which is called as a stem. Now, all menstrual cups may not have the stem, and it's completely up to you whether you choose a cup with a stem or a stemless cup. Now, if you have a cup with a stem, how it helps is basically by in the removal process. So once you've inserted the cup into your vagina and you're clueless where exactly the cup is, you can use the stem to actually identify where the position of the cup is. What you do is you, using your index finger, you trace for the stem. And once you've reached the stem, you feel for the base of the cup and you pinch the base of the cup, and it helps in easy removal. So that's the only purpose that a stem actually serves. If you feel that the cup size actually works for you and you feel that the stem is still coming out, you can always cut it out using a regular scissors. That's it. Now, the different shapes that are available, I'll just show it to you. So these are the different shapes that a cup can come in. And again, it's completely up to you which shape that you use. You can try out different shapes and see which one works for you. Now, determining which cup size works for you, that's, I think, something that everyone faces a lot of issue with. So I'll try to break it down in an easy way and how you can choose a cup of your size. Now, there's a very arbitrary way of deciding this, and that will be by depending upon your age and whether you're a virgin or not. So cups in general come in 3 sizes: the small size, the medium size, and the large size. Now, if you are someone who's a teenager or who's not had penetrative sexual intercourse till now, you might want to start using a small size cup. And in case it feels too small for you, you can always upgrade yourself and go to a medium size cup. Or if you are someone who's already had sexual intercourse or someone who's had cesarean delivery, then you can try out with a medium size cup. But if you're someone who has had multiple vaginal deliveries, you might want to start off using a large size cup. So this is a very arbitrary way of deciding which size to use, but the more proper way of deciding this will be by figuring out what your cervical length is. Now, before I talk about how to determine your cervix length, I think something I need to cover is the basic female anatomy, because a lot of people who have asked me about a cup have been really clueless about where the cup actually goes in. So they'd be like, dude, which hole does it actually go into? So I would like to break it down a bit by showing you guys this picture. So on the left side, you can see the perineal region. So perineal region is the part which comes between the female thighs. Okay. When you look at it, first thing that you see in the female external genitalia will be the folds that are present. And these folds are called as the labia majora. Once you separate the labia majora, you'll see the labia minora inside, and whatever tissue you see in the center is what the rest of the part is. So you'll see the clitoris, which is like a tissue which is present right on the top. And then you have the main 2 openings here, which is the urethra, which is the tiny opening that you see. And that's basically where you pee from. Right below the urethra, you'll have the vaginal opening. Now, vaginal opening is the one which we need to know more importantly. It's because that's where the menstrual blood is coming out from. And along with that, that's also the opening through which the baby comes out when you deliver, and the opening through which into which the penis is inserted when you're having sexual intercourse. And right below it is the anus, that the opening through which you shit basically. And on the right hand side, the picture that you see will help you to understand what the female anatomy in general is. So here you can see that the uterus is there. When you're menstruating, what happens is the innermost layer of the uterus actually sheds out, and along with the blood, it comes out through the cervix. The cervix is like a very tiny opening that is present at the end of the uterus. And through that cervix, the blood drips down through the vaginal canal and finally comes out through the vagina. Now, another important thing to understand is that a lot of people think that the vaginal canal is right straight like this. That's not how it is. Actually, it goes up vertically and then it becomes like slightly angulated. And why this is important to understand is because everyone's anatomy is different. So before you start using a menstrual cup, you have to get used to how your anatomy works. So for anyone who's trying out a menstrual cup for the first time, what I'm going to advise is try exploring how your vaginal canal feels like first, so that you're more accustomed to inserting the cup inside. Another thing to understand is where exactly your cervix lies, because that will help you determine what the cervical length is. Now, how do you do this is, uh, if you've never felt what your, if you never felt your cervix, how you understand what the consistency of the cervix feels like is, just touch the tip of your nose. Now, the tip of the nose is something very similar to what the consistency of the cervix feels like. So you insert your index finger into the vagina and keep going up till you feel this tip, which will be your cervix. And once you reach that tip, it will help you understand what the cervical length is. Now, how you do this is basically by something called as a knuckle method. So how the knuckle method works is, if you look at your index finger, there are these lines that are present on the index finger, which correspond to the knuckle joints. So in case you're inserting your finger into the vagina, and immediately once you've inserted it, while you reach this first line itself, if you're hitting against the cervix, that means you have a low cervix present. If you're reaching the cervix only when you reach this middle part, that means you have a medium cervix present. And if you're reaching the cervix, once you've gone completely inside and reached this all the way till here, that means you have a high cervix present. And how this is important is because it helps you to choose whichever size cup that you want to use. So if you're someone who has a low cervix, you will want to try out using a small size cup first. If you're someone with a medium size cervix, you will want to try out a medium size cup. If you're someone with a high cervix, you want to try out using a large size cup. So this is like a basic way of understanding which size cup might work for you. But again, you'll have to do your own research about this, because different brands, even though they come out with different size cups, each cup will have a different capacity to it. And because the capacity varies depending upon how heavy your flow is, you might want to choose a cup that perfectly fits your flow also. So that's how you choose the cup size. Now, once you figure out which cup size works for you, the another important thing that you need to figure out is how you will fold a cup before you insert it into your vagina. Now, for most people who haven't used a cup till now, what can seem really scary is the size of the cup. It seems really big, and you'll be like, how will you insert something that big into your vagina? Now, what happens is you never insert a cup completely in the way this cup is present. You always fold the cup into a size which is favorable for your insertion to take place. Now, there are different types of folds that are available in the market. You can try out whichever fold works best for you. But the three most common folds that I would suggest would be the C fold, the 7 fold, and the punch down fold. Now, I'll just show how these folds work. So this is my medium sized cup. For the C fold, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the cup first, okay, and then fold it half lengthwise so that it forms a C shape. So this is what a C fold looks like. Okay, then you have the 7 fold. Again, for the 7 fold, you close the cup completely, and then you need to bring down one corner of the rim to the opposite end of the base. It folds like this, and it gives you somewhat like a 7 shape. Then the fold that actually I use personally is a punch down fold. And in that, what you need to do is you punch this rim in the way that it comes all the way till the base here. So this is what it would look like once it's inserted. So the nice thing about the punch down fold is it actually provides the smallest diameter. So if you're someone who's trying out a cup for the first time and you're really scared about inserting something big, so what you can try it is you can try out a punch down fold, because at the end it just becomes this small, and that's all you're inserting into your vagina basically. Now, once you've tried out the different folds and you figured out which folds work best for you, and you're ready to try out a menstrual cup, remember that you should try using a cup for the first time only when you're actually menstruating. Please never try using the cup when you're not on your periods. Then, if this is the first time that you're using a cup, you need to sanitize the cup before you're using it. And how you sanitize a cup is to take a pan, fill it with water, keep the cup inside the pan in such a way that it does not touch the walls of the pan. Boil the cup for around 3 to 5 minutes. And once you've boiled it and dried it, you need to store it in these cute pouches that they come in. So you can store the cup within these pouches itself till they are ready for use. Now, before using a cup, make sure that you wash your hands with water and soap really well. Don't touch any menstrual product without washing your hands, because that's the best way to make sure that you don't have any infections while you're using a product. Now, you don't have to wash the menstrual cup as such with soap. You just need to wash it with water. The additional benefit that you get while you wash the cup with water is that it acts as a natural lubricant, so that you can easily insert the cup once you wash it with water. Now, before you insert the cup, you've already figured out which fold works for you. You also need to figure out which position you need to take while you're inserting a cup. Now, either you can squat down, or you can keep one leg over the toilet seat, or you can just sit on the toilet seat, or you might just stand. You can try out whichever position you feel more comfortable in and then go about it. Now, the concept of inserting something into your vagina can seem really scary initially. And what happens is, when we get really scared, we tend to clench our pelvic muscles together, because of which we may not be able to insert the cup completely. And so what I would suggest is, for everyone who's using a cup for the first time, try to relax. And I know when someone tells you to relax, you tend to get more scared. So what you could do is just meditate for about 5 minutes before you actually insert the cup. Get into a position that feels comfortable for you. Wash your hands. Using your left hand, spread open the labia, locate the vagina, fold the cup the way that you prefer, and you slowly insert the cup into the vagina. Now, this has to be in a very slow movement. You don't have to push the cup into your vagina very fast. Just do this slowly till you've ensured that the entire part of the cup has gone inside. And when I say the entire part of the cup, even the stem of the cup should go inside. It should not stay outside. And once everything is inside, you just release the pressure that you were using to keep the cup folded. You release the pressure, it releases the suction, and it stays in like this. So it creates a seal and it holds the cup in place. Now, this is basically for the insertion part. And if you're not sure that you've inserted the cup correctly, what you could do is always try pulling the stem slowly. So if the cup has not opened fully, the suction will not have been created fully. So what happens is, it might come out easily when you're trying to pull it. Now, if it's staying in place when you're pulling it, that means the suction is in place. Another thing is, sometimes what happens is, because you were pinching the cup initially, what happens is, once you've inserted the cup also, it might remain folded in this way itself. So how you figure out whether the cup has opened up fully or it's folded in between is that just run your finger along the base of the cup and see if you feel any dents. Now, if you are feeling some dent is present, that means the cup has not been opened up fully. What you could do is just hold the base and try to rotate it slowly so that it opens up once it's inside. Or you might have to remove the cup completely and try inserting it again. Now, when it comes to removing the cup, again, make sure that you're relaxed. Squat down, or again, keep the leg on the toilet, or sit on the toilet seat, again, whichever position works for you. Separate the labia and try to bear down a bit. Imagine you're giving birth to a baby right now, and give as much pressure as you can so that the cup comes down a little bit. Then you feel for the stem of the cup, go up, pinch the base here so that you release the suction, and with slow movements, you turn the cup and you bring it out. Once the cup has been brought out, whatever the contents are, you can either discard it in the toilet seat or into the sink, or if you're someone who uses the menstrual blood for other purposes, you can even store the blood in a container. And once you remove the contents of the cup, you just wash it with plain running water, and then you're good to go. You can insert the cup again. That's how a basic way of using a cup.
So we have a lot of questions from younger users. How old should you be before you use a cup?
Okay, so again, that's a concept that it's created a lot of stigma, because people feel like if they are virgins, they should not use a cup, or if they're teenagers, they should not use a cup. So cup can technically be used from the first time you start menstruating, as long as you feel comfortable using it. So there's no hard and fast rule that only if you are not a virgin should you be using a cup. There's nothing like that. There's no particular age as such present for it.
And we have another question saying, how many times should we remove and reinsert it in a day?
Okay, so if you're a first time user, what happens is you're still not sure about how much flow you're having. So what I would suggest for any first time user would be that You keep the cup inside for about 6 hours. Then you remove the cup and see how much exactly, how much the amount of blood has been collected, because most of these cups have measurements on them. So you can measure actually how much you're bleeding within that 6 hours. Now, once you get comfortable with the 6 hours removal thing, you can slowly try increasing that time from 6 hours. You can keep it inside for 8 hours and then slowly build it up. Now, in the first few days, because you have heavy flows, you might have to remove the cup every 8 hours. But on the days that you have very low flow, you can just keep it in for about 10 to 12 hours also.
Thank you, Dr. Jilshi. That was very well explained. And if anybody in the audience has any more queries, they can type it out in the chat box and we'll take it up. Now, I have a question to Dr. Dikshita. As Dr. Jilshi explained that sanitation and sterilization of the cup is very important. But in case an infection occurs, how do we spot it and how do we go about it?
Okay, so I think infections in general is a very broad term when it comes to menstrual products and while menstruating, because there are a lot of aspects that play a role. I just want to show you this one particular slide. Right. So it depends on the socio-demographic characteristics, the menstrual hygiene practices, which is the most important, the type of absorbency, the frequency and the place of absorbent change, the type of body hygiene washing and frequency of washing during menstruation. So all of these factors, including household enabling environment like access to latrine at home or water source, I think all of us have been very blessed. I think if we have a roof on top of our heads and an attached bathroom, because many women in India do not have this. So all of these factors together play a very, I think, a very integrated role in reproductive tract infections. So to simply break it down, I think the most common issues when it comes to menstrual products, let's say we're using a disposable sanitary pad. The most common issue is one, a person doesn't change it often. So like I said before, be it pad or a tampon, so because of the kind of chemicals that they contain and because of the amount of plastic that is present in them, so it basically forms a very perfect environment for the bacteria to grow. So if we don't change it properly, so ideally for a commercial pad, for a disposable sanitary pad, it's 4 hours. Every 4 hours, we're supposed to change the pad. And not a lot of women know this. Not a lot of women in the rural areas know this. So that again leads to infections, basically UTIs, bacterial vaginosis, and sometimes even candidiasis in women using reusable products like the cloth pads. So I think there's a general stigma associated with cloth pads, as in a lot of rural women use cloth rags. So what happens is they're very shameful of the product, so they wash it and they don't basically dry it under the proper sunlight. So a lot of research, I think there's one particular article which I can send it to you guys. It says that the candida infection was up to 50 to 70% higher in such women who do not wash it properly and who do not dry it properly, because if you don't wash it properly, the infection, it remains in the pad, and again it's going to reoccur. So next product is your tampons. I think all of us have heard this somewhere or the other. Tampons are directly linked to toxic shock syndrome. So toxic shock syndrome, what happens is because of the synthetic cotton that is present, the synthetic material that is present in the tampon as such, what happens is it creates this perfect environment, and the microbes also, they react to this tampon in an anaerobic environment, again causing this infection, especially Staph aureus. That's the organism, Staph aureus and Streptococcus. So these infections, again, usually I think tampons in India, not a lot of women use it. So this issue is not very specific to India as such. How this can be prevented? So firstly, like I said, changing of pads from time to time. If you're using disposable sanitary pads, again, I advise you not to use it. But if you are, again, I respect your choice. So if you do, you have to change your pads every 4 hours. Wash your hands before and after. And one more thing that I think I want to highlight in this talk is the method of disposal of these products, menstrual products, because I think after it leaves our house, after it leaves our bins, we forget about it. And there's a proper way of disposing, because I think we are exposing the waste pickers to a lot of infection, which is not really fair, because ultimately they are human beings too. And if you found used pads, and would you handle it? No. So I think one advice that I'd like to give, if you're using disposable products, is to wrap them in a newspaper and maybe write sanitary pads or mark an X on it, so the people know it, and so that they don't contract infections like hepatitis and so many other various infections that come from it. So that's one regarding the disposable sanitary pads. When it comes to tampons, I think there are a few things that we can do, such as one, to use less absorbent tampons, because the more the absorbency, the more chances of you getting a toxic shock syndrome. That's one thing. And number two is, do not leave it overnight. So if you want to use your sanitary pad, your tampons, you can use it, but instead for overnight, you can switch on to a pad, again, switch back to a tampon if that's what you're comfortable with. And when it comes to cloth pads, I think the very important thing is the washing and the drying. So these are two very important aspects. Wash it with soap, wash it well with cold water, and dry it under direct sunlight to make sure all the infection is gone, to make sure you are not exposed to reinfection. Yeah, and I think these practices are very important. Again, washing hands before and washing hands after. And when it comes to cups, I think like Jilshi said, boiling your cup before, firstly washing your hands, boiling it before use, and boiling it after use. I think these practices will help. And usually when you do spot infections, like itching, some amount of discharge maybe, rashes, so all of these, I think you should immediately consult your doctor instead of self-diagnosing, because I think a lot of us tend to self-diagnose. We Google it, and we apply whatever, or we use over-the-counter medications, which again might be very bad. So because we do not know the exact kind of infection, because a lot of these infections, especially when it comes to the symptoms, they sort of overlap. So what we should do, I guess what I suggest you to do, is to immediately see a doctor and basically take it up after, once you consult the doctor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deekshika, for that very clear explanation. Could you also tell us?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I add a few points
Yes,
to
please.
what Jilshi and Deeksha has shared? So I think one of the things that I've realized when we are doing these presentations and explaining how to use a cup, it just seems really like a long taxing process. It's not. It's exactly how you would have learned how to ride a bike, right? It is difficult initially. You might need hand holding and guidance. And one of the key things that I've realized is the initial discomfort is something. So for example, I don't know how to ride a bicycle even now. So I gave up the first time I fell down, and I don't know how to ride one. It's very ironic that I'm using this example, because I'm hoping most of you do ride a bicycle and have learned it. So it's exactly like that. And the benefits of using a menstrual cup is something that makes it heavenly. And that is something that really got me motivated. And the other aspect is also looking at how much you're contributing to the environment by going through this thoda sa chotu sa ordeal, right? It is going to be inconvenient. And one of the things that I've learned in the social sector is any change is inconvenient, right? So that's number one. Number two, first of all, I have a certain mindset about gynecologists. So if you are looking for gynecologists who give you a safe space to share and are non-judgmental, I have a link of all the crowdsourced gynecologists in the country on my Instagram handle. They are trusted, reviewed, will not judge you whether you're a virgin or whether you're sexually active before getting married or after getting married, if you're not having kids or having kids. I've gone through the entire question answer process. So it's great to see that there are so many millennial doctors. So I would prefer going to a millennial doctor than going to somebody who's going to judge me. So that's number 2. Number 3 is this concept about cervical length. There is no research to prove this, like Jilshi mentioned, right? It is very word of mouth and based on experience. So one of the recent posts that I did was around cervix length. And one of the doctors that I'm working with, her name is Tanaya, she pointed out how the cervical length could be, now this is her expert opinion, I'm not sure if this is true or not, is that the cervical length measurement is a marketing gimmick of menstrual cup companies. Okay, and that's how she shared about this, and that she shared how the cervix, the low or high of the cervix actually varies across the entire menstrual period of 28 days. So there are some days where your cervix is going to be high, there are some days where your cervix is going to be low, and I learned this only in the last month, right? So this is also to point out, so if you are getting into the medical fraternity and that position, this is a great opportunity to take some pieces of this work to actually do concrete research and invest on this, right? So for example, the water health and water sanitation, WSSCC, Water Sanitation and Health Council, collaborative council, they are now converting themselves into a fund that is dedicated for sexual health, hygiene and sanitation, right? So that is additional funding that will go into doing concrete research on these particular areas, right? So for example, I did not research anything about the cervix or how to use a cup because the Bund cup came in only one size. It still comes in only one size, right? You have a Sirona and a True cup that now have medium, large and XL sizes as well, right? So it again, going back to what I think Jilshi, Diksha and me have been reiterating, is every body is unique, and sometimes I might get really, so when I bought the cup, I didn't use the cup for almost a year because I was really scared. I didn't have information, and just the whole process seemed like a big deal, right? And now I know why that was, because the apprehension, the lack of information, the lack of support that I had no one in my network while I was making the switch. Now you have 3 people here in this call who you can reach out to. Sarah said that she's also converted. So just having that support system makes the process easier. It is not as, and after the first few months when you're accustomed, you won't have to constantly find where your vagina is. You will know where your vagina is. You will know how the cup goes best, whether sitting up or sitting down, and the process will become easier every month, right? So just wanted to highlight that. I think the information can seem overwhelming, but it's very helpful that we have 2 medical experts guiding us on this. So we know now that this is cool to do, right? And it's not some foreign process that we have to follow. Yeah, sorry Medha for interrupting you there.
Thank you so much. We're very grateful to have the 3 of you here with us to help us through this process.
Yes.
Yeah, Medha, go ahead.
Yeah, backing on to what Dr. Dikshita said, there's another query upon whether if a sanitary pad can cause infection even if it is changed properly.
So if it is changed properly, I don't think it causes infection as such, because there's very less research also based on the same. What it can cause is probably because of the amount of plastic that is present in it, it could cause rashes. Apart from that, again, like I said, chemicals, I think it is very, very important that we become aware of what we are putting down there every single month for so long. So yeah, I think chemicals is what you should consider. Maybe if you're changing, I don't think so. I don't think you, yeah.
And a question that is frequently asked is, are we able to urinate and defecate with a menstrual cup inside?
So,
So go ahead, Dikshita. You.
right. So, like Jilshi mentioned, I think you guys saw the whole anatomy of. So I've put one more here. Right. So again, you pee from a different hole, you poop from a different hole, and you insert the cup into a different hole, right? So peeing is not really an issue because, as you can see in the picture, you are basically inserting it completely into your vagina, which means the pee in general is not going to be interrupted by the cup. One more question, I think a lot of people, there's been a lot of discussion on the internet as well with regards to menstrual cup and pooping. So there are a lot of women who say that they remove the cup because they feel comfortable that way. They remove it, they poop, and then they put it back in. But like Jilshi said, the menstrual cup, basically when you put it in, it forms a vacuum, right? So because there are two separate, completely different muscular organs, I don't think when you poop, usually because of the amount of suction that is created and the way we've placed it and the size of the vagina, there is not really an issue about the cup slipping out and falling into the potty. Ma'am, if you can, sorry, Natisha, if you can say something, if you want to add something more, even Jilshi can add to it. Okay, so yeah, Jilshi, anything?
No, I think one of the reason why people usually think that menstrual cups will fall off while they're pooping is because most of them would have used a tampon before this. And what
Right.
happens in case of a tampon is, yeah, because it's like very small in comparison to the menstrual
Yeah.
cup, it does not really stay inside as tightly as the menstrual cup does. So if you're using a tampon, it might actually come out when you're exerting that intra-abdominal pressure because it's not very held tightly. But in comparison, in case of a menstrual cup, what happens is because it's like tightly held, it does not come off in the same way that a tampon might. At least I have not experienced that till now. Nitasha has been using the cup for like longer. I think she would know better about it also.
Right. Even though and it so there's actual science behind why the cup stays inside and doesn't come out, and I found this very interesting that hardcore science students also are not able to fathom this, right? And this comes from a psychological space of putting a foreign body inside foreign entity inside my body, right? I think that's the apprehension, and it's a mindset change that really need that. For example, that was a big reason why I didn't take this up, because I was like, I don't know anyone else who's doing it, and I had to constantly call Sonal and disturb her that I'm trying this. The first time I tried, I actually thought that like it was in my head that it's gonna hurt. It was not hurting, but I put it inside, and because it did not open properly, it started hurting, and I gave it up. Right, and I did not have the support system. I didn't have the amount of brands that are now available. Only in the last 2 years, I know at least 10 new brands of menstrual cups in the market. Right, so that's a very interesting shift that has also happened, that there are so many players, and there's going to be still discourse around why rural women can't use menstrual cups, right? If you visit the Boond or Ecofem or TrueCup websites, they work with women from marginalized communities, they work with rural women, and rural women are more open to using a menstrual cup because it is much more affordable. Another very quick calculation to do: what is the amount of money each of us is spending every month on our menstrual hygiene needs, right? Calculate that over 35 years. For me, it was 1500 every year So for 35 years, it's somewhere around 1.5 lakh rupees. I'm like, I could have sponsored 4 kids primary education. Like that is like legit. And then I'm telling myself, I'm actually looking at that saving and trying to go sustainable in my lifestyle as well. Because menstruation is one thing I'm passionate about, going zero waste completely. So I've started making small switches in my kitchen, small switches in my bathroom, because sustainability then becomes something that you just start in general, right? What am I? So if I see the movement that Greta Thunberg is doing, and then I'm generating waste, I felt that how am I not contributing more to the world and the environment? Right? Something that I do own body first, and then look at the environment secondary, depending upon how your focus looks like. It just happens, and it's a journey, right? So, which is what I actually wrote in the chat. There might be reasons for which the menstrual cup will not work out for you, and that's okay.
Nitisha, I think you've lost connection. Can you hear me?
So until
Okay, I think
Nitisha reconnects back to us, one more frequently asked question is whether cycling, running, or swimming can cause leakage or displacement of the cup. So if Dr. Dikshita can tell us, elaborate on this.
Right. So, because of how the cup is placed inside, usually running, cycling, or swimming, they're usually not affected at all by using the cup. That's one of the main advantages of a cup. I think we've been bombarded by very misleading advertisements, especially when it comes to commercial sanitary pads, where we see women jumping and running around, cycling and doing all sorts of sports, when in reality it's quite the opposite, because I think a lot of us are very uncomfortable when it comes to doing all these things with a sanitary napkin as opposed to a cup, because you get the freedom to do all these things when you use a cup. So I hope that answers it.
Nitisha, I think you lost connection at the end. Do you mind repeating what you just said at the end?
I'm so sorry, I just lost the flow. So what I was saying is that it's okay even if you don't make a switch to a menstrual cup because it's not working out for you. The purpose of this session is to enable menstruators to make informed choices. That choice can still be a single-use sanitary pad. And that's okay, right? So there's no judgment attached to making a switch to a sustainable product. If you have all the information, what is the choice that you're going to make for your own body, the environment, and all of the other individuals who are also involved in the whole menstrual health and hygiene cycle? Like Diksha pointed out, the sanitary waste pickers, the sanitation workers, all of them are also a part of this cycle, right? Also, the gynecologist role becomes important for who have specific conditions called vaginismus or endometriosis or adenomyosis, where sustainability, even though you want to really make that switch, it's not feasible, and that's okay too, right? So it's not that create that pressure on each of you कि boss आज तो switch करना ही है क्योंकि environment को बदलना है. Sorry for the Hindi. Like changing the world is very necessary, but not at your comfort and cost, right? So that is very important to understand.
Thank you, Nitisha. That was really insightful, because there is a lot of dilemma about whether to pick the environment or ourselves. But if we do want to reduce our carbon footprint, one of the main places to target is the younger population. So what ways do you think we can encourage the younger population and also bring in the parents to help the children encourage using sustainable menstrual products?
Right. I think you are doing it through this session. I went through your page when you initially sent me the request, and I see the work that a lot of young people are doing. The Action Network Fellows, the other fellows, at least 5 years younger than me, and there are so many of them who are doing really great work. Can everybody hear me? Sorry.
We can
Yeah,
hear you.
we can hear you.
Are doing really great work. Yeah. I think it's good to see that there are non-menstruators who are also a part of this session. I think enabling that space also for non-menstruators to become period allies is also very, very important. I think the best place to start is with our own circles. That's our immediate influencing network, our friends, our best friends, our sister-in-laws, our mothers. I recently, for my campaign, a 15-year-old reached out to share her story. And I was mind blown, right? Because we've been talking about the whole virginity myth in relation to menstrual cups a lot. And her example is going to be a really inspiring one for adolescent menstruators. So I think just having that conversation and creating that space while also being mindful that everybody has their own choice to make, and also understanding that this process takes some time. So being empathetic and compassionate towards, so both my best friends have not made the switch until now. And it's been 2 years since I started engaging with them in a dialogue. So it does take time. People have different lives, different work styles, different priorities as well. So just giving them time and space and all the information. I think this platform acts as one of the key ingredients, which is busting myths, giving information that is relevant and valid, and coming from credible sources. So I think that this is the way to start. If more individuals started caring about this and just similarly creating more spaces, I think young people will definitely be engaged. Another cool way to engage is actually do more fun campaigns around this, sharing your stories, going on Facebook lives and doing more Instagram lives, sharing it with more people so that it reaches the people and gets inspired. College networks, youth communities, in say for example the Bangalore circuit is something that SAC can pick up, and yeah, just engage.
Thank you so much, Nitisha, for that wonderful answer. So we'll move straight to the audience question. So a question that's come is, what if there's overflow of blood in the cup?
I think the only reason why, I think the only reason why overflow happens is because you've not changed the cup very frequently. So if you're someone who actually has a heavy flow, you might still need to change the cup every 6 hours or 8 hours, whichever works for you. Now, another reason why they have those measurements is so that you can actually keep a check on how much blood you're collecting each time. So for the next cycle, at least you will know that, for the first 2 days, I bled this much, so I need to change it more frequently. So other than that, overflow does not happen. Even when you're lying down, even when you're sleeping, actually, the cup does not leak no matter which position that you take. Even you can do your yoga poses also without worrying about the cup leaking, because the cup stays in place because of the seal it's creating. So because the cup can actually hold quite a lot of blood in comparison to in comparison to a sanitary napkin or in comparison to a tampon, because it holds that much amount of blood, you can keep it in place even up to 12 hours so that you can sleep peacefully at night without having to wake up in the middle of the night and change the cup.
Thank you, Jilchi, for that answer. Medha, if you have any more questions?
Yes. Now there is another question which was there in our pre-event form, which quite a few had wanted to be answered, whether the hymen damage occurs when we insert a menstrual cup. So if Dr. Dikshita or any one of you could...
Okay, so...
Is Joshi...
answering.
I think connection has been lost with Dr. Jilshi. If anyone else
So
can pick up
if
that question.
you're someone who doesn't know basically
Okay.
what a hymen present at the opening of the vagina, though there are countries like even now, even in India, I think the presence or the absence of hymen is the presence or absence of the hymen is related to your female virginity. Now, what happens is there are women who are born without a hymen, completely without an hymen, or you can have tears in the hymen when you're doing intensive exercises, or if you're going horseback riding or jumping around a lot, or basically just exploring yourself, you might have already broken the hymen. It is true that the menstrual cup can also cause a break in the hymen, but it should not be that much of an issue as it's been considered, because when you get tied to this concept about you're having intact hymen, it again empowers a lot of patriotic concepts of female virginity being present and everything. So I think that's something we need to think about too. Like, when you talk to other people also about it, you need to make sure that even they understand that hymen could have been broken way before the sexual intercourse itself happens because of other reasons also. So
Thank you so much, Jilshi. I think we'll hand it over to Sanskriti. If anyone has any more questions, can you please put it up quickly in the chat box because we have to wrap up soon.
I think if I can add one more point.
Yes, sure.
Yes.
So when we talk about a particular product, you need not stick to that particular product under the sustainable group. You can always use a cloth pad along with a menstrual cup, as in when basically according to your lifestyle. So in maybe sometimes you're more comfortable with a cloth pad, sometimes you're more comfortable with a cup. So you can always switch. There's no particular need for you to stick to one particular product.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vikshita. If Sanskriti can take over the mic, please.
Does anybody in the audience want to directly ask some question? They can, I think.
Yeah.
Could you share with us a list of companies from where we can purchase these? I think we can send that over via WhatsApp, if that's
we
fine.
can
So
create a list.
we can share those
Yeah.
links with you. So if everything is done, I'll sum up.
Yes.
Does anybody have any more questions left? Okay, I think everybody's pretty clear after the session.
It was a wonderful session. Everyone was able to answer all their questions. So
Yes.
So we would like to thank Dikshita, Dr. Dikshita, Dr. Jilshi, Nitisha, ma'am, Nitisha, for this wonderful presentation, and especially the PPT Dikshita and Jilshi, invested so much of time into. And I would want to take some time and just say that we specifically worked on this project because I've seen how much waste I create when I menstruate, and I thought I should, when I got to know that there are other options available, so I thought with my team, who is supporting me in this, then we should totally take up this topic and ask people who are actually experienced in the sector. So I hope at least from the 50 people who participated in the event, at least 2 or 3 people make the change, support us in the change. So I think that's it. I would request everybody to just switch on your cameras so we can take a picture.
hope you guys can see the comments coming in the chat box. They are very positive. So that goes to say that you guys gave an amazing session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. It was very informative.
Thank you so much for inviting us for
Everybody
this
just
webinar.
can everybody just switch on the cameras.
Also, thank you, Jilshi and Diksha. I learned a lot of new technical terms that I'm going to use in my sessions moving forward.
Actually, if you guys have any more doubts about any of these products, please free to contact either Dikshita or me or Nitisha and clear out your doubts, because we understand that when you're starting to use a different product, it can be really scary, and we would want to help out as many of you as possible in actually making this switch to a sustainable menstrual product. If Sarah can, actually we can just like add in our Instagram handles or something, so
Sure.
that you guys
I'll
can
add in.
directly.
You
Sure,
guys are already
sure,
tagged
Sarah.
in the official posts from
Okay,
SSC.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys can directly contact them on their Insta handles. It's amazing. Especially Nitisha ma'am's is like wonderful. I follow her as well. I follow an inclusive teacher also.
Thank you.
And one more thing, if any of you are interested in reading all these research articles, I think it's a very interesting read. I have like about 7 or 8 of them. So you guys can ask Sarah or any of them, and I will forward all the links to you guys. Please do go through them. They're actually very interesting and very informative.